Ron Johnson here with the Vikings Entertainment Network. Going to talk the NFL draft with NFL Network analyst, Coach Brian Billick. Coach, thanks for joining us. But before we jump into this, I don't know how good your memory is.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah. It's pretty. It's still. I'm old, but it's pretty good.
Do you remember 2002?
I do. I do. It's that's a long time ago, obviously, but you were a pretty good wide receiver. We enjoyed having you, and it's well, the NFL's one of those tough crucibles, but yeah, that was a fun time back in there. Young team.
Yeah, I remember I think we were the youngest team in the NFL that year.
Yeah.
But let's go in, put your mind back. You're Coach Brian Billick back in 2002, looking good, standing up in front of Ozzie. You're about to draft Ed Reed, who's now a Hall of Famer. What goes into the mindset of drafting a future Hall of Famer?
The thing that drew us to Ed, beyond you could see obviously the physical abilities. This is at a University of Miami now, so the pedigree is pretty good. He was the undisputed, unquestioned leader of that team, and was kind of the minute he showed up. And that's what we heard. That's what you saw. So you saw that kind of leadership. We had a pretty good hurricane on the team at a time in Ray Lewis, that Ozzie was drawn to Ray Lewis much in the same way when they drafted him in their first draft. Was that beyond just the physical abilities, there was that leadership. He had that intuitiveness about the game. And that's clearly what we saw in Ed Reed.
Yeah, and you look at, I saw on the NFL Network, your guys, Nate Burleson, he seems to see some, Hall of Famers in this previous draft. He mentioned Gophers Antoine Winfield, but then they also mentioned Kyle Brandt mentioned Justin Jefferson, Minnesota Vikings wide receiver. You actually drafted Randy Moss. You were around for Chris Carter. What does it go into? What can the Vikings fans look forward to when a kid like Justin Jefferson?
Oh, I love what we see in Justin Jefferson. Had a chance to visit with him. We interviewed him for our podcast, TA podcast. And I loved, this is a bright-eyed, energetic, kind of, I'm not going to say came out of nowhere, but I don't know that anybody expected he was going to have this kind of season that he had. And obviously in losing Diggs, the question was, well, what's going to be opposite Thielen? And they kind of hit gold with this kid. And he has the complete package. And there's no reason that there's not going to be a continued upside from him going forward.
And then, you look at the offense, let's stick offensively. The Vikings recently cut Riley Reef due to cap, issues and this new COVID cap, if you want to call it that. What should the Vikings look for in free agency when you look at, they definitely need pass rushers. Kyle Rudolph is now gone. You got rid of your left tackle. What does the Vikings free agency look like?
Well, we always took the approach that you wanted to address things in free agency. It doesn't have to be the eye-popping big deal, which because of what you just, that's the first time I've heard that term, the COVID cap. I'm going to use that. I'll give you credit the first time, but after that, it's mine. But because of the COVID cap, particularly this year, it doesn't mean go out and have a big splash and give the big contract. There are going to be some deals there. And we always took the approach that if we could address things in free agency that allowed us then to take the best player available in the draft, that's the best formula. You don't want to force yourself into taking a player in the draft, maybe a little higher than he should be by way of value, simply because need is a terrible evaluator. Right. And so if you can get those things done in a basic way in free agency in a year where it shouldn't be prohibitive contracts, then that's going to bode well for going into the draft. And then what if it's one of these offensive linemen, if it's one of these edge rushers, if it's a tight end that comes your way, you can go ahead and do that because you've taken care of some of the other needs in free agency.
Yeah, and let's look at the NFL draft and free agencies. Like you said, it's going to be tough this year. This is not a splashy offseason for a lot of these guys, unfortunately. What should the Vikings do with the 14th pick, barring that they kind of get what they needed? Not a splashy guy, but maybe some guys to fill in the spots they need for free agency. What does that 14th pick look like?
Well, there's going to be some options because, we always looked at the board. You have your first round board. But even within that, there's a line of demarcation. These are your blue chippers. And for us, a blue chipper for Ozzie Newsome was you never move out of a position to take a blue chipper or you do what you need to do to move up, if possible, to get a blue chipper. And that line typically would be maybe the 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th pick. That's pretty deep to go into the blue chip, where 10 guys that are absolute codlock, guaranteed, no questions. And if you've got one of those options, so sitting at 14, it's likely that Minnesota, if there's someone that, should, because it gets prohibitive to move up to 10 to 5 if you're at 14. So you're likely going to have to see what comes your way. And then here comes the tough choice. It's at 14, if someone covets something, there again, someone that out of need has to come up at that 14 pick. And we're so early, maybe wide receiver, those 2 wide receivers, Waddle and Smith from Alabama, are kind of looking at, Waddle's moving up the board a little bit. But let's say you're looking for that wide receiver. And then after that, the wide receiver choices get a little more limited. So maybe somebody wants to come up to 14. If you can still pick up relative value and drop back 4, 5, 8 spots. Let's say the Vikings you talked about, in the offensive line. Let's say, the young kid Slater could be there at 14. Now, some have him move him up. If he's there at 14, you take him, okay? But Christian Darsaw, maybe he's a kid that, depending upon that rating of an offensive tackle, and you've got them fairly close, but it looks like Darsaw could fall down a little further. Maybe you could take one of those trades and fall back to 18, 19, 20 and still get. So that's the kind of conversations they need to have. Like I said, the receiver isn't a particular need with what they did last year. There's a couple linemen in there, a couple edge rushers, Pay from Michigan. We'll see if Rousseau from Miami is one that is there. So they should, given the needs we just talked about, have some options and fill a need with what should be an appropriate pick.
Yeah, and I know this is early. I mean, we're looking at March. But if you have to predict, because I know it's coming, you guys are going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
You got to predict the season.
Which is really stupid to do, of course. But hey, that's what they pay you for, so you do it.
Correct. Without the draft, we don't know what the Vikings are going to look like. But if you were to take last year, you do take the coaching change, you take a couple player, ins and outs. The Vikings, how do they fare? I mean, because now the NFC North changes. You get rid of Matthew Stafford, you bring in Jared Goff. You still have Aaron Rodgers, but who knows what that love affair looks like with Jordan Love. And then you look at the Bears. Who knows who's going to quarterback the Bears? Right. My guess is it's not going to be Mitchell Trubisky. No. How do the Vikings fare, not just in the NFC North, but in the whole season next year?
Well, I think they're right there. I think the interesting thing about the NFC is, other than Tampa Bay, who's earned that mantle now, and maybe Green Bay, it's kind of a wide open field, like you said, because there's a lot of changes going on, even within the division. Green Bay is clearly going to be the team they have to go after, and there's no reason to think that they're not going to be good again. Aaron Rodgers is very comfortable with what they're doing. They're going to be able to add some pieces, make some changes defensively. Like you say, Chicago, Detroit, you just don't know. You just don't know how much better they're going to be, who the quarterback's going to be in Chicago. Can they finally get a running game in Detroit? Can they bring in the thing? Dan Campbell's proving to be I don't know how good a coach he is. He's an interesting quote. We'll say that. So it helps my business now, but we'll see. So clearly it's going after Green Bay, and there's no reason, as you said, they've got offensive weapons. There's no reason they shouldn't be good offensively. Coach Zimmer's is tasked with, they've got to kind of get themselves back into that level defensively that kind of fell off last year due to injury, to being so young. That's really job one, that to get the defense back up to where that combination still makes one of the great venues in the league right now. In Minnesota, there's no reason to think that they're not right there, but it's going to be a dogfight.